I am doing the very first thing that I need to do to start designing that Dresden plate quilt, and that is I need to baste the entire quilt first, and I want to show you how I'm going to do that. First, big shout out to Marie at the Quilted Poodle. I am using a technique, it was the very first thing I ever learned how to do, in fact, in Pattern CAD, was to stitch out a straight line, and that's what I'm doing right now. So here it is. You just make a straight line in Pattern CAD and save it. Then you're going to want to use 1 point placement because you don't want 2. You want a real straight line. So if you try and place 2 lines, you're not sure that it's really going to be straight. So what you will do is you will then unlock the ratio lock and tell it how wide you need the line to be. And the smallest height that you can have is 1/4 inch. And then I'm just going to stitch that out with like a 7 stitch length. And that's what I will put my quilt top on. So what I have done is I have a straight line that I basted with QCT all the way across, and I am lining the top of my quilt right on that straight line, and I'm going to baste it to that line. That's all I need to do to start the very first basting process. I am done basting the very top line, the very top of the quilt, to the straight line that I have quilted with QCT 6. So the top is now attached to the backing, but I do not float my quilt tops. I just choose not to do that, particularly a big quilt like this. So what I'm going to be doing next is I'm going to be attaching the top to the bottom rail, and I will roll that up on there, and then I'll get started with the basting process. Just getting the quilt onto the bottom rail has already informed me so that I can make a decision before I even get started with the rest of the basting process. I can already see that the borders are a little bit wavy and that it will be hard to control the ends. I can also see that this quilt top isn't very flat, and as a result, I'm probably going to need to zhuzh and try and make up for some of those not lying flat areas, those slight imperfections as I go. And as a result, what I'm going to do to try and help control some of that is I'm going to baste across my belly bar twice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down the left side, I'm going to go in the middle, it doesn't really matter where, just roughly in the middle. Then I'm going to baste down the rest of this side and go across and up and back down. And I'm going to, so that I have basting at the top, I have basting across the middle, basting on left and right sides, and at the belly bar. So that is what I plan to do, and that's going to, at least for me, even if it isn't true, although I believe it is, I feel like I'll have some control over not pushing all those uneven areas into one spot that I can't correct then. So I believe that it helps me prevent issues like that happening, so that's why I do that. And I'm almost done basting this quilt, but one of the things that I want to do is I want to, while I'm at the end, I'm at the very last block in the quilt, I want to see how much throat space do I have from here up to the belly bar, or the take-up rail, not the belly bar, sorry, from as far as my space will go this way up to the take-up rail while everything is still on the take-up rail, so I know what is my maximum distance when I'm doing these blocks. If I want to do the block, I need to make sure that that 15.5-inch block is actually going to fit in my quilt space. And I know that it will. I can actually see that I have enough room, but I'm going to measure the distance and write it down anyway. And I'm going to use the toolbox on the 21X Elite. You actually have a ruler that's in here, and I'm just going to measure that space. So I have 16.7 inches, so that's plenty of room if I wanted to do a block pattern. So I have now finished quilting, basting this quilt top, and the last step is I'm going to then take it off the leader here. It's still not the backing is still attached. You never want to unattach your backing, but I can take this off the leader now, and what that will do for me is, first of all, I am now assured that I have a straight edge to work with at the bottom. I know that this was a pretty straight quilt, that I didn't have to move it around too much. But I also know something else now that will actually help me when I'm picking out patterns for this block. None of these Dresden blocks used any kind of interfacing. So if I had not basted this, I wouldn't quite have known this. But when my machine was going over this, it has a tendency, since these petals are not interfaced or fused in any way to the fabric, it's kind of moving that fabric along. So that is good for me to know in advance. When I'm picking a pattern, I'm going to not pick something that's really detailed because I would have some worry that it is going to get caught up underneath this since it's not fused in any way. It's just quilted on the outside. That's all it is. It's not through the middle. So I need to be careful when I'm stitching this out for certain. And again, what this is going to do for me, the basting process is, for starters, I know that, particularly with a big quilt like this, that I know where the bubbles and the unevenness is, and so I can adjust for that with the basting before I get started. That way I know I'm going to be left with a straight edge when I get down at the bottom. But also, I'm going to be able to now get underneath my machine for the whole project, which if you're going to be changing a bobbin or looking at more stitches for any reason, that is a really good thing to have, to be able to do that and not have to go underneath your machine 100%. So I like doing that. And again, the other reason would be when you have a large quilt like this, where a lot is going to end up on your take-up rail, you can measure how much throat space you're going to have at the end of your quilt before you start designing, so you're sure whatever you're designing, you'll have enough space in your throat space to finish the project. And so I am really happy that I did that, and now the next stage will be to figure out what I'm actually going to quilt in it, now that I have all this information up here. Happy quilting!